The massive crystalline chambers of the Galactic Consortium stretched beyond sight, their walls pulsing with alien energy that made the air itself hum with power. Ambassador Jinho Park felt sweat drip down his spine as he stood before the Council of 12 species, each one representing millions of worlds across the galaxy. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept them clasped firmly behind his back. This was it. After months of hearings, debates, and desperate negotiations, humanity's fate would be decided today. The Prime Speaker floated above the central dais, its translucent body shifting between colors that had no names in human language. When it spoke, the words bypassed Jinho's ears entirely, appearing directly in his mind through the neural translation network that connected all galactic civilizations. All except humanity, of course. Humans were still too primitive for such. Technology, according to the consortium. Species designation human. Verdict, exile from all inhabited systems, the Prime Speaker announced, its mental voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Your kind's primitive aggression threatens galactic peace. The evidence is overwhelming. Jinho's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd known this moment was coming, but hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. Around the chamber, holographic displays flickered to life, showing scenes from Earth's history. Wars, conflicts, violence spanning thousands of years. To the aliens, it painted humanity as nothing more than savage beasts wearing the mask of civilization. "Prime Speaker, please," Jinho began, his voice barely steady. "We've evolved. We've learned from our mistakes. Give us another chance to prove ourselves." But the Alien Council had already made their decision. The Vakari delegate, its 4 arms, moving in dismissive gestures, projected images of human military vessels. "Your species builds weapons first and asks questions later," it communicated. "Even now, your homeworld bristles with defensive systems. You cannot change what you are." Minji Kim, Earth's military attaché, stood beside Jinho in her crisp blue uniform. Her jaw was set tight, and her hands were clenched into fists so hard her knuckles had gone white. She'd served 20 years in Earth's space defense forces, fighting off pirates and protecting trade routes. Now she watched helplessly as everything humanity had built among the stars was about to be stripped away. "You're making a mistake," she whispered to Jinho, her voice barely audible above the chamber's energy hum. "They don't understand us at all." The mistake had been accepting the consortium's initial contact 15 years ago. When the first alien ships appeared over Earth, humanity had been thrilled. Finally, proof that we weren't alone in the universe. The consortium had seemed friendly, even helpful, sharing basic technologies and inviting Earth to join their galactic community. But there had been conditions, rules, restrictions. No military vessels beyond a certain size, no weapons research above specified power levels, no expansion beyond designated systems without approval. Humanity had tried to comply, but it went against every instinct that had carried the species from caves to starships. When human colonies started pushing boundaries, exploring forbidden sectors, building defenses the aliens deemed too powerful, the consortium's patience ran out. Outside, the crystalline walls, massive energy generators hummed to life. Minji felt the vibration through her boots as barrier emitters positioned throughout human space began their activation sequence. The technology was beyond human understanding, creating walls of pure energy that no known force could breach. In minutes, every human world, every space station, every ship would be trapped inside an invisible prison. The Prime Speaker's form shifted to a deeper shade of blue, indicating finality. "The barriers are now active. No human vessel may leave designated space. No alien ship may enter. Your species has chosen isolation through your actions. Learn to live with the consequences." Captain Sung-Ho Lee was checking navigation charts aboard Orbital Defense Station Prometheus when the emergency transmission burst through every communication channel simultaneously. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers, floating in the station's low gravity as the words echoed through the command center. "All human vessels return to designated zones immediately. The exile begins now." Through the station's massive viewing ports, Sung-Ho watched as sleek alien patrol ships took positions around the barrier perimeter. Their hulls gleamed with technology humanity could barely comprehend, energy fields crackling between crystalline weapon arrays. They looked beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like mechanical angels carrying out divine judgment. "Captain," called his communications officer, her voice tight with panic, "we're receiving similar transmissions from every human outpost. The barriers are active across all our systems." Sungho activated the ship-wide intercom, his voice carrying to every corner of the station. "All personnel, this is the captain. Maintain your positions and continue standard operations. We knew this day might come." But even as he spoke the words, Sungho felt the weight of humanity's new reality settling over him like a heavy blanket. They were alone now, cut off from a galaxy that had decided they were too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. On Mars, young engineer Yuna Choi was calibrating atmospheric processors when the alien ships appeared in the rust-colored sky. She'd grown up hearing stories about the consortium, about the wonders of galactic civilization that humanity might someday join. Now, she watched those dreams die as energy fields crackled to life around the planet's orbital space. The alien vessels were unlike anything in human design philosophy. Where human ships were built for function and durability, these craft seemed to flow like liquid metal, their surfaces shifting and adapting in real time. They moved with impossible grace, positioning themselves at exact intervals around Mars, like pieces on a cosmic game board. Yuna's supervisor, an older man named Dongyun, stood beside her at the observation deck. "Well, kid," he said quietly, "looks like we're on our own now." But as Yuna watched the alien patrol ships settle into their positions, she felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Not fear, not despair, but anger. Cold, focused anger. The consortium thought isolation would break humanity, force them to become something they weren't. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. "Let them watch," she whispered, her breath fogging the observation window. "We'll show them what humans can really do when we're pushed too far." The exile had begun. For the aliens, it was the end of a problem. For humanity, it was the beginning of something much more dangerous. The elevator descended for what felt like forever, carrying Daeho Kim deeper into the heart of Mount Fuji than any human had ever gone before. The walls around him were smooth, metal, carved by machines that worked in absolute silence. At 35, Daeho had spent his entire adult life building humanity's greatest secret. He'd never breathed alien air, never shaken hands with a being from another world. The exile had made sure of that, but the stories the elders told still gave him chills. Tales of crystalline beings who could speak directly into your mind, of ships that moved like living creatures through space, of a galaxy filled with wonders beyond imagination. All of it now locked away behind energy barriers that had held firm for 50 years. The elevator finally stopped with a soft chime. The doors opened to reveal the most magnificent sight in human space, the Prometheus complex. The underground cavern stretched for kilometers in every direction, its ceiling lost in shadows above industrial lighting that never dimmed. Thousands of workers moved between massive construction bays where humanity's future was taking shape. "Sir, you're going to want to see this," called Heejin Park as she approached across the metal walkway. At 28, she was the youngest person ever to hold the title of Chief Propulsion Scientist. Her lab coat was stained with engine grease, and her safety goggles hung around her neck. Behind her, sparks flew from welding operations that never stopped. "Show me the new drive system," Daeho commanded, though he couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. He'd been waiting months for this moment. They walked through assembly lines where robots worked alongside human technicians, building components that no alien eye had ever seen. The consortium thought humanity was still using primitive chemical, rockets and fusion drives. They had no idea what 5 decades of desperate innovation could accomplish. The prototype sat in the center of Bay 7, a sleek cylinder the size of a subway car. Its surface was mirror-smooth, reflecting the lights of the facility in perfect clarity. But it was the sound that caught Daeho's attention first, a deep, thrumming hum that seemed to vibrate through his bones like the heartbeat of some massive creature. "We call it the Fury Drive," Heejin explained, her eyes bright with pride. "Powered by controlled antimatter reactions, channeled through crystalline matrices we synthesized from asteroid minerals. No alien technology required. We built every component from scratch. Deho walked around the drive system, noting the elegant curves of its housing, the careful placement of cooling vents, the thick power cables that fed into the facility's main reactor. What's the output? 12 times more efficient than our best fusion drives, Heejin replied. And that's just the prototype. The production models will be even better. We can cross the solar system in days instead of months. Above them, crane systems moved massive, hull sections into position. The ships being built here weren't like the exploration vessels humanity had constructed before the exile. These were different, sleeker, more focused, built for a single purpose. In the asteroid belt, 300 million kilometers from Earth, another kind of construction was taking place. Admiral Jinwoo Han floated in the zero gravity of his command ship's bridge, watching through reinforced viewports as the final touches were applied to humanity's secret fleet. The ships stretched in formation as far as the eye could see, their dark hulls designed to absorb rather than reflect light. Status report, Jinwoo called to his navigation officer. 47 heavy cruisers ready for deployment, sir. 23 destroyers completing final systems checks. The carriers are loaded and standing by. The officer's voice carried a note of pride that had been absent from human space forces for decades. These weren't the kind of ships the consortium had permitted humanity to build. No exploration labs or diplomatic quarters. No comfortable crew areas or observation decks. Every cubic meter was dedicated to weapons, armor, or the massive Fury drives that would carry them wherever they needed to go. The asteroid field provided perfect cover. From the outside, it looked like humanity was struggling to mine basic resources from the rocks floating between Mars and Jupiter. The alien patrols that occasionally swept the barrier's edge saw exactly what they expected: a primitive species barely managing to survive in their cosmic prison. They never looked close enough to see the weapons testing ranges hidden among the larger asteroids. They never noticed the communication arrays disguised as mining equipment. They certainly never spotted the massive shipyards carved into the hearts of the biggest rocks, where human engineering had accomplished what the galaxy thought impossible. On Luna, Commander Somin Lee sat in a monitoring station that officially didn't exist. Her job was to watch the Watchers, tracking every alien patrol ship that came within 1,000,000 kilometers of the barrier. The facility was buried beneath the moon's surface, its sensors disguised as routine mining operations. "Sir?" Another alien. "Patrol just passed the barrier," she reported through encrypted channels to Admiral Han. "Same pattern as always, 3 ships, standard formation, maintaining distance. They're not even trying to get close readings." Through her instruments, Somin could see the alien vessels clearly. Sleek things that moved with liquid grace, their hulls shifting color as they adjusted to cosmic radiation, beautiful and arrogant, just like their builders. They patrolled humanity's prison with the casual attitude of guards checking on animals in a zoo. "They still think we're struggling to survive," she added, watching as the alien ships completed their sweep and moved on to the next sector. Jinwoo's voice crackled through the communication system, carrying a note of dark satisfaction. "Let them think that. While they've grown soft, we've grown strong." And it was true. The consortium species had spent millennia removing their capacity for violence, modifying their own biology to eliminate aggression and competition. They'd created a galaxy of perfect peace by lobotomizing themselves, cutting away the very drives that had once made them great. Humanity had taken a different path. The exile had stripped away everything comfortable and safe, leaving only the core of what made humans human: the drive to survive, the refusal to give up, the anger that burned cold and steady when someone tried to cage the human spirit. In research facilities across the solar system, human scientists worked with desperate intensity. They'd reverse-engineered every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on, then improved on it. They'd pushed theoretical physics beyond what anyone thought possible. They'd built weapons the peaceful galaxy had never imagined. The consortium had wanted humanity to evolve beyond conflict. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous: a species with nothing left to lose and 50 years to prepare. Every human alive had grown up knowing they were prisoners. Every child learned mathematics by calculating missile trajectories. Every teenager studied engineering by building better armor plating. The exile had lasted 5 decades. For the consortium, it had been 50 years of peace and prosperity. For humanity, it had been 50 years of preparation for the day the barriers would fall. And that day was coming, whether the galaxy was ready or not. Deep in the Prometheus, Complex Daeho Kim looked at the Fury Drive prototype and smiled. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what humanity had become in the darkness between the stars. The derelict ship hung in the void like a metal tomb, its hull scarred by centuries of cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts. Captain Kyung-hwan Yu guided his exploration vessel through the debris field that surrounded the ancient craft, his pilot's instincts telling him this was something special. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of humanity's largest vessels, but its design was unlike anything in the consortium database. "Bringing us alongside the main docking port," announced his pilot, carefully maneuvering their sleek reconnaissance ship against the derelict's hull. The magnetic clamps engaged with a metallic thunk that echoed through both vessels. Kyung-hwan had been exploring the far reaches of human space for 15 years, always pushing against the boundaries of the exile zone. Most of what he found were empty worlds and dead asteroids, but this ship, drifting in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, was different. Its hull bore markings that definitely weren't human, but they also didn't match any known consortium species. The airlock cycled through its sequence, equalizing pressure between the 2 ships. When the heavy door finally opened, stale air rushed out carrying the metallic scent of age and abandonment. Kyung-hwan stepped through first, his magnetic boots clanking against the deck plating. Behind him came his team of 5 specialists, each one hand-picked for their skills in xenoarchaeology, engineering and combat. Emergency lighting flickered to life as they moved through the corridors, triggered by motion sensors that had somehow survived eons of neglect. The ship's interior was a maze of passages that seemed designed for beings roughly human-sized, though the proportions were slightly off. Door frames were wider, ceilings higher, as if built for creatures with broader shoulders and longer limbs. The architecture is definitely non-human, observed Min-hyuk Park, the team's xenoarchaeologist. He ran his gloved hands along wall panels that were covered in intricate carvings. But look at this craftsmanship. These aren't primitive markings. This is advanced engineering disguised as art. The corridors were eerily quiet, except for the soft hum of life support systems that had apparently been running for centuries on some kind of automated power source. Strange symbols glowed softly along the walls, providing just enough light to navigate by. As they went deeper into the ship, the symbols became more complex, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar. "Captain, you need to see this," called Jisoo Kim from somewhere ahead. Kyung-hwan followed her voice around a corner and found himself standing at the entrance to the ship's central chamber. The room was enormous, its domed ceiling rising 40 meters above their heads, but it was what filled the chamber that took his breath away. Holographic displays flickered to life as they entered, apparently triggered by their presence. The air, filled with images and symbols, 3-dimensional maps of star systems, and what looked like historical records. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had developed, yet somehow it felt familiar. "The computer systems are responding to us," whispered Na-hyun Choi, the team's technology specialist. "It's like they're designed to be understood by beings like us." One of the larger displays showed a star map with dozens of systems marked in different colors. Many of the red zones matched current consortium territory, but there were other markings that didn't appear on any modern galactic charts. As they watched, the display zoomed in on one particular system, showing a world covered in vast cities and orbital installations. "That's a Karathi homeworld," Min-hyuk said, his voice filled with excitement. "I've heard whispers about them in ancient consortium records, but I never thought we'd find actual evidence." The displays began cycling through what appeared to be historical records of the Karathi civilization. They saw images of beings that looked remarkably similar to humans, though taller and more heavily built. The Karathi had built an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds, their ships moving between stars, with technology that made current consortium vessels look primitive. But these weren't the monsters Kyung-hwan had expected to find. The records showed scientists, artists, engineers, and yes, warriors, but they also showed families, children playing in alien parks, couples walking hand in hand through crystalline cities. They were complex beings capable of both great beauty and terrible destruction, just like humanity. "Look at this," called Taehyun Kim from across the chamber. He was standing before a display that showed what appeared to be a timeline. According to these records, the Karathi were contacted by the early consortium 50,000 years ago. They were offered the same choice as everyone else. The timeline showed the gradual transformation of consortium species over millennia. Each race had been approached when they reached a certain level of technological development. They were offered peace, prosperity, and membership in a galactic community. The price was simple: surrender their capacity for violence through neural modification. Most species accepted. The few that refused were given one final chance to reconsider. If they still refused, they were exiled to the dark spaces between civilized systems, just like humanity. They were forced to choose between peace and extinction, Minhyuk translated from the Karathi text that scrolled across the displays. Those who refused the neural modifications were systematically eliminated by their own transformed kin. But the most shocking revelation came when the central display activated, showing genetic records that had been carefully preserved for 50 millennia. The data revealed the truth about every species in the current consortium. Before their forced evolution, they had all been like the Karathi. Like humanity, the proud Vakari had once been fierce warrior poets who conquered worlds with both sword and song. The ethereal Zenthari had been brilliant scientists who pushed the boundaries of physics through dangerous experimentation. The crystalline, beings who now served as the consortium's prime speakers, had once been traders and explorers who built the first networks between distant stars. "The consortium didn't evolve," whispered Nahyun, staring at the genetic evidence that flickered before their eyes. "They were lobotomized. Every single species had their essential nature surgically removed." In the ship's armory, Taehyun discovered weapon blueprints that made humanity's most advanced military technology look like stone tools. Energy weapons that could crack planetary crusts, defensive systems that bent space itself, propulsion drives that treated the speed of light as a gentle suggestion rather than an absolute law. But more importantly, he found something else hidden in the deepest data cores. Star charts showing the locations of other exile zones, other species who had refused the consortium's gift of artificial peace. The Karathi hadn't been the only ones to resist. Dozens of species had been banished to the darkness, their civilizations either destroyed or driven into hiding. "Look at these coordinates," Taehyun said, his voice shaking with excitement. "There are others out there. The Draven Empire in the outer spiral, the Nexari Federation beyond the galactic rim, even something called the Iron Brotherhood, in a system that doesn't appear on any consortium maps. Humanity wasn't alone in the darkness between stars. They were part of a hidden galaxy of exiles, species that had chosen to remain themselves, rather than surrender their souls for the promise of peace. The consortium's perfect civilization was built on the bones of everyone who had dared to say no." As the team copied the Karathi databases and prepared to return to human space, Kyung-Wan felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. The exile hadn't been humanity's punishment. It had been their salvation. While the consortium species had willingly destroyed everything that made them unique, the exiles had preserved what really mattered. The galaxy thought it had eliminated its problems by casting out the troublemakers. Instead, it had created something far more dangerous, a network of species who remembered what it meant to be truly alive. The emergency broadcast cut through every communication channel across human space like a knife through silence. President. Won Ho-Lee stood in the crisis center beneath Geneva, watching dozens of screens that showed the same terrifying message repeating on every frequency. His hands gripped the edge of the command table as the words echoed through the reinforced chamber. Priority transmission to all species. Code Black Emergency. The Devourers have returned to our galaxy. Repeat, the Devourers have returned. Won-Ho had heard whispers of the Devourers in the ancient Karathi records, but he'd always hoped they were just myths, creatures from the space between galaxies, beings of pure hunger that consumed entire civilizations before moving on to fresh hunting grounds. According to the old stories, they'd swept through this galaxy millions of years ago, devouring everything in their path before disappearing back into the cosmic void. "Sir, we're receiving secondary transmissions from Consortium Worlds," reported his communications director, her face pale as she relayed the incoming data. "Multiple systems under attack, defense fleets being destroyed faster than they can respond." The main display showed a real-time map of the galaxy, with red indicators spreading like infection from the outer rim toward the core worlds. Each red dot represented a star system that had gone silent, its planets stripped bare by forces beyond imagination. The Consortium's perfect civilization was crumbling in a matter of hours. Then came the transmission that changed everything. The voice of the prime speaker, the crystalline being that had pronounced humanity's exile 50 years ago, now carried notes of desperation that neural translators could barely process. "The Devourers have returned," the message repeated across all frequencies. "Any species capable of military action, we request immediate assistance. The Consortium offers full amnesty and membership to any force willing to defend civilized space." Wonho almost laughed at the irony. The same beings who had called humanity too violent to exist among civilized species were now begging for that violence to save them. But there was no time for satisfaction. If the Devourers consumed the Consortium worlds, they wouldn't stop at the barrier surrounding human space. Admiral Borum Shin stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, the Prometheus, as the greatest fleet in human history prepared for its first journey beyond the quarantine zone in 50 years. Through the reinforced viewports, she could see the assembled might of human engineering stretching to the horizon. 200 warships powered by Fury drives, their hulls bristling with weapons that combined human innovation with ancient Karathi knowledge. "Fleet status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "All ships report ready for hyperspace transition," responded her navigation officer. "Fury drives are at full power, weapon systems charged and standing by." The ships around her were nothing like the vessels humanity had built before the exile. These were predators, sleek and deadly, designed for one purpose: to fight and win against impossible odds. Their hulls were dark as space itself, covered in armor plating that could withstand planet-cracking energies. Inside each ship, human crews who had trained their entire lives for this moment waited at their stations. "Ma'am," reported Gunho Park, from the tactical station, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures from the Consortium core worlds. Whatever's hitting them is unlike anything in our databases." The sensor displays showed readings that defied understanding. Ships the size of small moons, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for objects that massive. Energy weapons that could crack planets in half with single shots. And worst of all, the complete absence of any communication attempts or negotiation. The Devourers didn't want territory or resources. They wanted everything, consumed and converted into fuel for their next hunt. "Consortium forces are being swept aside," Gunho continued, watching as defensive fleets that had maintained galactic peace for millennia were destroyed in minutes. Their peaceful philosophy offers no defense against pure destruction. Boram nodded grimly. The Consortium species had spent so long without real conflict that they'd forgotten how to fight. Their weapons were designed for crowd control and policing, not warfare against an enemy that wanted to erase them from existence. They were lambs facing wolves, and the slaughter was already begun. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace transition," Boram commanded. "Target coordinates Consortium capital system. We're going straight into the heart of it." The human fleet vanished from normal space in a series of brilliant flashes, their Fury drives tearing holes in reality itself. They emerged above the Consortium's capital world just as the planet's orbital defense platforms crumbled under the Devourer assault. The sight that greeted them was like something from humanity's darkest nightmares. Massive creatures of living metal and energy swarmed through the system, their forms constantly shifting between different configurations. Some looked like enormous jellyfish made of molten steel. Others resembled mechanical spiders the size of cities. They moved with purpose and intelligence, systematically destroying everything that could support life. The beautiful crystal cities that had once floated in the planet's atmosphere were being torn apart, their inhabitants fleeing in vessels that couldn't possibly outrun their pursuers. Consortium warships, elegant things designed more for ceremony than combat, exploded like toys under the Devourer weapons. "Admiral, the Consortium fleet is withdrawing from the system," reported the sensor operator. "They're abandoning their own capital world." But where the Consortium ships fled, humanity advanced. Borum watched as her fleet spread into attack formation, each ship taking position according to battle plans that had been refined over 50 years of exile. These weren't the confused, desperate maneuvers of beings who had forgotten how to fight. This was the coordinated assault of a species that had never stopped preparing for war. "All ships weapons free," Borum ordered. "Show them what humanity learned in the dark." Silgi Kim, the fleet's weapons coordinator, unleashed technologies the galaxy had never seen. Plasma cannons that fired miniature stars, missile systems that opened hyperspace rifts to deliver their payloads instantly across vast distances, and energy shields that bent space itself to deflect incoming attacks. The weapons were born from human desperation and Karathi knowledge, creating combinations that even the ancient warriors could never have imagined. The Devourers, accustomed to facing pacified species that barely fought back, suddenly encountered an enemy that fought with terrifying efficiency. Human ships danced between the massive alien creatures, their smaller size and superior speed, allowing them to strike at weak points that had been identified through careful analysis of the ancient records, target the neural clusters at the base of their primary appendages. Silgi called out over the fleet communication network. "Karathi records indicate that's where they process tactical information." The battle raged across the entire star system as humanity's fleet engaged enemies that dwarfed their ships by orders of magnitude. But size meant nothing when faced with precision and determination. Human torpedoes found their marks, boring deep into alien flesh, before detonating with the force of small suns. Energy beams sliced through Devourer hull plating that had seemed impervious to Consortium weapons. "This is Admiral Shin to all Consortium vessels," Borum broadcast on all frequencies as her fleet continued its deadly work. "Humanity has returned, but we're not here to save you. We're here to save ourselves." The message was clear to anyone listening. Humanity hadn't come as supplicants seeking forgiveness for their violent nature. They'd come as equals, bringing the very violence the Consortium had once feared. The galaxy that had cast them out as too dangerous now watched as that danger became their only hope for survival. The battle for the galaxy's future had begun, and for the first time in 50 years, humanity was no longer fighting alone. The great assembly hall on the Consortium capital world had never seen anything like this before. Where once only peaceful, modified beings had gathered to make decisions through calm consensus, now the air crackled with tension and raw emotion. Ambassador Chanwoo Kim stood at the center of the crystalline chamber, facing representatives from across the galaxy who were experiencing feelings they hadn't felt in thousands of years. The Devourer War had ended 3 months ago, but its effects were still rippling through every corner of galactic society. The neural modification circuits that had kept entire species docile and peaceful had been damaged during the conflict, their delicate systems overloaded by the stress of genuine fear and desperation. For the first time in millennia, alien beings were feeling anger, hope, ambition, and all the other emotions they'd surgically removed from their psyches. "You exiled us because we wouldn't abandon what makes us human," Chanwoo addressed the assembly, his voice carrying clearly through the translation networks. "That same strength just saved your civilizations. Perhaps it's time to reconsider what you've done to yourselves." The Vakari delegate, its forearms trembling with newly awakened rage, spoke in patterns of sound that bypassed the neural translators entirely. We remember now. We were warriors once, poets and fighters who sang battle hymns as we conquered the stars. What did we become?" Across the chamber, other delegates were having similar revelations. The ethereal Zenthari floated in agitated patterns, their translucent forms flickering with colors that hadn't been seen since before their modification. Ancient memories were surfacing, buried beneath layers of artificial calm that were finally cracking apart. Chanwu watched their confusion with a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. How you became what you thought was perfect. But perfection without struggle, without choice, without the possibility of failure, that's not life. That's just existence. The consortium's former prime speaker, its crystalline body now shot through, with veins of angry red light, projected its thoughts with unprecedented intensity. The modifications were meant to bring peace, to end the cycle of violence that had consumed the galaxy for eons. And what did that peace cost you? Chanwu asked. Your creativity died, your exploration stopped, your science stagnated. You built a galaxy-wide museum and called it civilization. On Earth, cultural ambassador Yejin Han was working with teams of alien psychologists and human researchers to help entire species rediscover their lost heritage. The process was neither quick nor easy. Beings who had lived for centuries without experiencing genuine emotion were struggling to understand feelings that humans took for granted. The key is not to fight the emotions, Yejin explained to a group of Zenthari who were learning to cope with curiosity for the first time in millennia. Emotions aren't the enemy. They're information. They tell you what matters, what's worth protecting, what's worth changing. The rehabilitation centers that had been established across human space were filled with aliens who were essentially learning to be themselves again. Some species adapted quickly, their suppressed natures bursting forth like water through a broken dam. Others struggled, their minds so altered by the modifications that reclaiming their original selves seemed impossible. But gradually, as weeks turned to months, the galaxy began to change. Art flourished on worlds that had seen nothing but sterile perfection for eons. Scientific research exploded as beings remembered what it meant to be curious about the unknown. Even romance returned to species that had forgotten what it meant to choose a mate based on desire rather than genetic compatibility algorithms. Admiral Junseok Lee commanded the new Terran Defense Fleet from his flagship, the Indomitable, as it patrolled the borders between human space and the recovering consortium worlds. But his ships weren't there as conquerors or occupiers. They were guardians, protecting a galaxy that was learning to live again. Status report from the outer sectors, called his tactical officer from across the bridge. 3 Devourer scout ships detected near the rim, Junsek replied, studying the sensor displays. They're testing our defenses, seeing if we've grown complacent since the main battle. The human fleet had grown substantially since the wars, and incorporating both alien volunteers and hybrid technologies that combined the best of multiple civilizations. Ships that had once been purely human now carried crew members from a dozen species, all working together to defend their shared space. But the most significant change was happening on Earth itself. In the mountains of Colorado, where humanity's secret weapons had once been forged, Yunji Park had opened the first galactic military academy. Young humans and aliens trained side by side, learning not just the art of war, but the deeper truth that had taken humanity 50 years of exile to understand. Peace isn't the absence of strength, Yunji told her mixed class of cadets as they practiced combat maneuvers in zero gravity. Peace is strength in service of something greater than yourself. The Academy's students came from across the galaxy. Young Vakari who wanted to reclaim their warrior heritage. Zenthari scientists who had realized that some discoveries required courage as well as curiosity. Even modified consortium beings who were learning to embrace the parts of themselves they'd lost. The quarantine barriers that had once imprisoned humanity were being converted into something entirely different. The same energy fields that had kept humans trapped now served as beacons, marking safe havens where species could come to rediscover their true natures without fear of persecution. Ships arrived daily at the old barrier perimeters, carrying refugees from worlds where the old consortium hardliners still maintained power. These were beings who had chosen to reject the modifications their ancestors had accepted, seeking asylum in the space that had once been humanity's prison. We're seeing applications from over 40 species, reported Hyojin Kim from her office in the newly constructed Integration Center on Luna. They want to learn what we learned. They want to remember what they were before the modifications. As Earth's chief historian, Hyojin had been tasked with documenting humanity's journey from exile to liberation. Her final entry in the official record would become required reading at schools across the galaxy, a reminder of what could be accomplished when beings refused to surrender their essential natures. "They cast us out to die in the darkness between stars," she wrote, her fingers moving across the holographic keyboard with practiced precision. "Instead, we learned to make our own light. The galaxy thought our fire would burn out. They never imagined we'd use it to forge something new." Outside her window, construction ships were completing work on the new orbital stations that would serve as meeting points between human space and the reformed consortium. The structures were marvels of cooperative engineering, combining human durability with alien elegance, creating something that neither species could have built alone. The age of artificial peace was over. Across the galaxy, beings who had been made perfect were choosing to become whole again. They were remembering what it meant to struggle, to fail, to get back up and try again. They were learning that the capacity for violence wasn't humanity's flaw, it was the foundation of their strength. The age of earned peace had begun, built not on the suppression of dangerous impulses, but on the conscious choice to channel those impulses toward protection rather than destruction. The galaxy was finally learning what humanity had always known, that the greatest peace comes not from the absence of conflict, but from the presence of those willing to fight for something worth preserving. The end.